did the forum influence your decision making?
I can't say that it necessarily influenced where I was headed because I felt a very strong pull to sell, but it's definitely helped me accept that reality, become more peaceful with that decision, being able to talk so much about it with people I really had just met, but got to know pretty quickly.
Welcome to The Decision from Nashville EO, where you will hear the rest of the story after tough decisions were made by entrepreneurs who faced adversity and lived to tell about it.
Welcome to The Decision, the podcast by EO Nashville, by and for entrepreneurs who are starting, building, growing, scaling, selling businesses, dealing with all the BS that we deal with in the course of doing business. With me as always today, my partner in crime, Mr. Robert Hartline.
Good to be with you, Eric.
Good to be with you as always. And our guest today, Mr. Taylor Thomas, company Samplize. See, yep. I remembered all those things. I'm pretty proud of myself. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
And you've been a member for about 4 years and we've never met. And that's just how EO Nashville is these days.
Yeah, it's grown.
Yeah. So how's your experience been so far?
Oh, I love it. I initially joined EO because, being a solo entrepreneur, it's a lonely time. I mean, you have your teammates, you have your spouse. If you have a spouse, you've got your family, friends, but it's good to have a community of entrepreneurs where you can share the things that you feel like you can't always share with other people, whether it's something bad or something really good,
Yeah, you have to be really careful who you tell things to. Right.
Exactly.
So what was your first entrepreneurial experience?
Oh, wow. My first entrepreneurial experience has to go back to when I was a kid. Growing up in a small town, I did the lemonade stands. I did door-to-door flyers for pet sitting. Amassed a number of clients by the time I was probably 6 years old and saved up enough money for a computer. And, I always did different things over the years growing up. And in middle school, I sold fireplaces on eBay, set up accounts with manufacturers for different things. I flipped websites. First company I started was an internet marketing company in high school that I kind of led into college. And then in college, I started a much larger company, but we won't talk about that because I think the statute of limitations is over, but we'll leave it at that.
Okay, fair enough. And now Samplize, that's the company that...
I started Samplize right after college. I've not been involved in that company for 2 or 3 years now, but I sold it back in 2021. Okay. That was, the first large company that I started. Yeah. And Samplize, so my mom's an interior designer. And I was talking with her about problems that she faces on a daily basis. And she said paint sampling. She was constantly buying poster boards and sample cans of paint, painting those boards to, visualize large format color. And she just knew that there had to be a better way. And make a long story short, I came up with a peel and stick paint sample with 2 coats of real paint, large format, peel it and stick it on the wall, move it around. So I talked to a few thousand interior designers over the course of about a year to kind of fine tune what I thought the product would be, what the service offering would be, validate product market fit, and ended up moving to Chattanooga after school to get that started. There's some cheap manufacturing space out there, definitely not here around Nashville.
Oh yeah.
So I moved there, I had some friends there, and started off really small, but grew really quickly. Figured out how to manufacture those products, how to store them, how to fulfill them, and then just copy paste scale. We went from 2,000 square feet to I think over 60,000 square feet in the same building. Went from really just myself and a couple buddies to I think at our peak we had around 120 employees before we eventually sold that.
Well, you must have made an impact because I'm nothing when it comes to, I don't watch HGTV or any of those things. And I knew what the company was after you described it. I knew that I knew of that concept. So yeah, if it reaches me, yeah. So what drove you to sell?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. We sold about 4 years into the business. I originally had planned on being involved much longer. I saw this as something I could potentially maybe sell 10, 15 years down the road, but I wasn't thinking about selling. There's a lot of different factors kind of at play that ultimately pushed me to that decision. But the real thing was we had a new competitor enter the market. The company is called Material Bank. They had an interesting business model. It was all types of sampling for households, flooring, tile, hardware for cabinets, all kinds of stuff. And they really sold to the trade, and they charged the manufacturer essentially as a lead generation fee. When they sold or moved these boxes, they were free. And so they were looking to get into more of the consumer side of sampling, and we were a natural fit. So they wanted to do peel and stick paint samples on their platform. I should also say Material Bank, it was a startup. They started a little after us, but much larger. They were valued at one point, or I think they were valued at 900 million during their first fund raise. Then when I joined later, it was, I think, 1.2 billion. So in comes this competitor with this massive amount of funding. I had never raised money. I cash flow growth. So it was a little bit intimidating to hear from them that they were coming in. They had reached out to me probably a year prior, and I had just been ignoring them. I didn't have any interest in selling. I didn't have any interest in even talking about it. And then I get an email from someone saying, hey, by the way, we now own the intellectual property behind this concept. And I thought, yeah, I should probably talk to them now, but I talked to my attorney. He said, don't talk to them, just ignore it. So I continued to ignore it. And then I get a message from the CEO of the company over LinkedIn, and he had kind of a different approach. He said, Taylor, I really think we should talk. I think we have a really great opportunity for you. I can see something really good working between us. So at that point, I decided to finally get on the phone and talk to him. And he kind of got right to the point and said, we're looking to acquire your company. We're building essentially a copycat of Samplize right now. We've got a ton of money that we can put into it. We have the IP. But really, we would prefer to have you and your expertise, and we would like to acquire Samplize. So that kind of started a series of talks and a series of wrestling hard questions and trying to figure out what the best path forward was.
What was that like, trying to navigate that decision for you? Because there's a lot of fear at play.
Yeah, there's a lot of emotions. There's fear. There's also excitement. The amount of money that it was looking like, it's a life-changing amount of money. I was really young. I still am pretty young, but I think it was 27 or 28 at the time. And, it's a life-changing amount of money. And my parents had some skin in the game. My brother had some skin in the game. I knew that it would be a life-changing amount for them. But also during that time, we were just coming out of COVID. Well, really, we were still in it. But supply chains were all messed up. Our demand went through the roof, but we couldn't keep up with orders. So we were having all these frictional issues. We started to amass a lot of debt for the first time ever during COVID, just because we had to be shut down for so long. And I made the decision to keep people paid during that time. So we exhausted all of our funds. So, there's a side of excitement. There's a side of fear. Thinking through the decision to sell, there's disappointment. I wanted to be in there longer. We were tripling in size year over year, and we hadn't even started to slow down yet. But yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of emotions going through that, and what would happen to the team, what would happen to the people that helped me get that business to where it was. There's just a lot to think about.
Yeah. How many employees did you have at the time?
At that time, around 100, between 80 and 100.
Did you have, certainly you were trying to keep that under wraps during the process of negotiation and talking?
The size?
Yeah. The sale.
The sale. Yeah. Yeah, I did have to keep that under wraps. I told the two guys, my two top guys who had been around since the very beginning. They were what I considered true leadership. We had a team of 10 people in leadership, but those two guys were my right-hand guys, and they knew everything from the beginning. But I wasn't able to share with them any real details due to NDAs, and also just trying to not say too much before anything was really real, because I don't want to scare anyone.
What was the time like from the moment he messaged you on LinkedIn until
the sale?
Yeah.
About 9 months.
Yeah. Was that a whirlwind?
Yeah. That was the most challenging period in my life ever.
Yeah.
And so you were going through all this maybe right after having joined EO, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I had joined EO and then immediately started going into this process. So it was interesting, and our forum was a brand new forum, so we're still learning how to do it. And I've got these massive updates always. And
I bet that made for some interesting presentations.
Yeah.
New
certainly.
forum. This is a big deal.
certainly did.
So
it was helpful.
How did the forum influence your decision making?
I can't say that it necessarily influenced where I was headed, because I felt a very strong pull to sell, but it's definitely helped me accept that reality, and become more peaceful with that decision. Being able to talk so much about it with, people I really had just met, but got to know pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would say.
What was the most surprising thing about selling that you weren't expecting after?
It's something that I should have expected. Probably didn't take it as serious as I should have, / thought maybe it would be different, but just the experience of working for my own company. So after I sold, I was supposed to work for them for 4 years. And I'm not going to say no promises were made as to what that would look like, but it was understood I would be the boss, I would lead it. And to a certain extent, I did, but I had bosses I had to internally pitch anytime I wanted to do something. Before I would just do it, test it, fail fast kind of thing. The most surprising thing was just being in an environment where now I have an authority in my own business, and just not being able to go with my gut on things and how that would ultimately make me feel, and having to take 13, 14 meetings a day just internally. Just that whole shift to more of they were a startup, but it felt more like a corporate world. That whole shift was just,
You probably didn't have that experience before.
No, I did not.
Yeah.
I did not. I always did something for money that I was in charge of my whole life. So I never had a job.
How long did you last?
I lasted about 1.5 years of the 4 year.
Well, how did you navigate deciding to leave?
I was kind of pushed that direction, and I also was just butting heads. In the beginning, I would be in leadership meetings with the CEO and COO of the larger company, and I don't know. It was just kind of weird. I didn't know them super well. There was just a lot of friction with how decisions were made. And ultimately, once the integration process was done, by doing the 13, 14 meetings a day, once I had transitioned out of managing the day-to-day on every level, there really wasn't much else for me to do. I couldn't pursue the marketing that I wanted to pursue. We had one in-store retail program that I was pursuing at the time, and that was about it. And so ultimately it reached a place where I was offered to go out as a consultant and bill as a third party instead of being an employee. And I took that because it gave me the opportunity to start thinking about what I was going to do next, and really spend more time on that than just minutia.
Did you have many options to choose from what you wanted to do next, or is there something that's...
There was something that I started working on pretty quickly. That's kind of its own story. I don't know if we really want to get into that, but I'll keep it somewhat short. My wife, I got married during the time of the business sale as well. So
Big changes.
yeah, big changes. But my new wife, her best friend at the time, her dad approached me saying that he had a business concept that he had been thinking about for a long time and wanted to involve me in. Ultimately, it didn't work out with us. That's a much longer story, but it was around window shades. And so I've kind of taken that concept and ran with it. But essentially, I've figured out a way to get window shades done from design to installation as little as the same day instead of waiting 8 to 12 weeks, which is pretty standard.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a last mile manufacturing out of like a mobile fabrication shop that comes to the site and assembles all the shades. And then
That's pretty revolutionary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it could be really cool.
So you could literally have them installed same day.
Yeah.
Cut and, oh, wow.
Yeah. Yep. Up to a certain job size, and then job sizes or super custom jobs that we can't do same day, still within a week, because we do the fabric, like the main fabrication side as well. We've got a warehouse, and so yeah, I'm really excited about that. The plan is so right now I'm getting the first truck off the ground here in Nashville, smooth out all the kinks. I've done a ton of work with software on this over the last 2 years. Once that's off the ground and the kinks are smoothed out and I've got a good model, the plan is to franchise that, go out into different territories with different trucks. And then kind of at my side of the business level is just the manufacturing of the shade rolls and the distribution of all of the components. So you have all the distribution built in, the trucks do all the sales and installations, and how that model would work, we would just require that all the trucks buy the components from us, and we won't charge any royalties or anything like that. So I'm excited about it.
This is wild. So it's interesting to see how your mind is working, because you're doing things that just really don't exist.
Yeah.
You're making them from scratch. Was there many other ideas that you were toying with before you?
Yeah. Yeah. There's always, I don't know. I always think about weird things, but I had a concept to automate doors. So like inside of a house where you can automate shades, you can automate lights, you can automate thermostats, but like the opening and closing of doors, there's not anything on the market. And my wife always likes the bedroom doors closed when we go to bed, and I never remember to close them. And I got tired of getting up all the time when doing everything else on my phone. So I came up with a concept that I still think will work. I put that on the back burner to do the shades thing, but a way that you can do that in a sleek way without having a giant box on a door or anything like that you currently have to do in like hospital environments.
The open mechanism to.
Yeah, so it essentially works on the hinge. It's a powered hinge. And then you have to do something special with the faceplate as well on the door.
Yeah, that's wild.
I don't know.
It's
maybe one day with that one.
Yeah,
I got a lot on my plate right now with
like in
shades.
terms of your life. What's the most important decision you've had to navigate?
I mean, the business sale is definitely one of them. At least, on the business level. I don't, there's been different decisions over the years. This decision to get married, you know, I think that was a big one. A lot of decisions all at the same time. And then we had our son a year later. It's just been kind of a whirlwind over the last few years.
How are you as a leader since you've been in the how has your entrepreneurial?
I think I've matured, certainly. In the early days of Samplize, it would be hard to look at me as a leader if you weren't just looking at a piece of paper. You know, all my employees were my age. We would throw some crazy parties in the warehouse. We would sleep on the paint tables. So I've definitely grown up. I've matured. I've learned a lot about culture through having so many employees. You know, I think that was probably the biggest lesson I learned during that time of growing Samplize was that culture matters. You know, I was always told that in school. I went to Belmont for entrepreneurship, so I took some classes, and they were always harping on culture, and it just became such a cliche to me that I ignored it to my own detriment. You know, growing way too fast and not hiring for personality fit. Ultimately, the culture built itself, and it became a very toxic work environment for a lot of people.
Yeah, for years I heard culture in EO, and I thought ours was okay, and then until I realized it wasn't, and then went to a program through Belmont. It was a collaboration between Belmont and EO, and it really changed my life in a lot of ways. But we won't get into that.
Yeah.
So what sorts of steps did you take once you realized it was toxic? How did you go about figuring it out?
At that point, it unfortunately was really too late, and we ended up selling the company.
Okay.
Kind of in the heat of that.
How would you approach the next opportunity?
Next time, definitely planning culture and doing it intentionally is one thing, but also hiring for the person instead of the skill. Because skills can be trained, but a bad personality, a bad attitude, those things are really tough. In the really early days of Samplize, we had a great culture. When we were 15, 20 people, everyone got along, everyone worked together, everyone went the extra mile individually, and they really operated as a team just naturally. And once you start getting negative people in that work environment, it starts to kind of spoil everyone's attitudes, at least in my experience. So definitely hiring for those traits, and also not being afraid to let people go when you start to see those things pop up.
Yep. I think the worst thing that I have heard recently that resonated with me is that typically as a leader, you may be the last person to know when it's time to let somebody go.
Yeah.
And they all come out and tell you after they're gone. It's like, why didn't you guys tell me this?
I experienced that a lot.
Yeah. I think most people don't want to be a snitch.
Well, it's not only that. They just, they don't want to tell you bad news. People just do not want to tell you bad news.
Right.
And so they don't, you know, that's like in 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's exactly. And I try to be purposeful. Like, I cannot see everything. I need to have eyes.
Yeah. We even had a collection box where people could anonymously put stuff in there, suggestions, complaints.
Yeah.
And even then, I don't know, specific names never came up.
Did you have the experience of later looking back on when somebody left, remembering things that happened that made you understand people were telling you, but you didn't pick up on it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I've experienced the same. Obviously I have.
I had a lot of my good employees, and again, nobody liked to share names, but they would say, you know, there are people here who don't have the interests of this company at heart, just straight up are trying to internally sabotage the company.
Yeah.
And not just slacking off, but genuinely want it to fail.
Wow. That is toxic.
Yeah.
What is your unique ability? What's the thing you love most about the work you do when you find flow?
Yeah, definitely strategic problem solving. I love thinking through problems and coming up with weird solutions, weird answers. I'm definitely a hands-on operational type of person. I like designing systems and workflows and automations and business processes.
Well, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super fun.
Now, if you are in Nashville, Tennessee, and you're an entrepreneur, you want to be involved in a community of other entrepreneurs doing amazing things, you can visit eonashville.com and learn how over 350 entrepreneurs right here in Nashville, Tennessee gather together in forum, in community, grow life together, and making important decisions. Thanks for watching, and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks for listening to the Decision Podcast by Nashville EO. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.